All right, let's get right into it. We're going to break down a story that should honestly tear up every modern military playbook. It's about a shocking event in the Strait of Hormuz back in March 2026. And what happened there? Well, it challenges basically everything we thought we knew about naval power. So, right off the bat, here's the central puzzle. Just read that sentence again. A country gets its navy absolutely wrecked, but somehow, it blockades the most important shipping lane in the world. And it does this against the most powerful navy ever assembled. How on earth is that even possible? That's exactly what we're going to unpack. And this timeline just lays it all out perfectly. I mean, look at this. Within 3 days, 72 hours, Iran's regular army and navy are basically gone. But it takes 6 full weeks, a month and a half, before the U.S. Navy feels it's safe enough to even send its own ships through. That gap, that massive gap between day 3 and week 6, that's where the real story is. So yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How did a country that was, for all intents and purposes, militarily defeated, manage to pull off a massive strategic and economic win? You know, it all started with this overwhelming show of American force. The conflict began with something called Operation Epic Fury, an assault so massive it was supposed to end the war before it even really started. And I mean, just look at the raw numbers here. We're talking 900 strikes in just half a day. The Iranian leadership was taken out, their air force was turned to scrap on the runway, and their navy was sent to the bottom of the Gulf. By every single traditional metric of war, it was over. The U.S. should have owned that strait completely. But that's not what happened. Not even close. So instead of just folding, Iran pivoted. They switched gears completely. They knew they couldn't win a conventional fight, so they shifted to an asymmetric one, using a very specific set of tools that were, pretty low tech, but had an incredibly high impact. Their new strategy was basically a 5-layer cake of chaos. They started laying sea mines, they launched these explosive drone boats, they messed with GPS signals, and they used coastal missiles to threaten any ship that got close. And then there's step 5, the most important one. They weaponized a commercial market. Now, there's actually a military term for what they were doing. It's called anti-access/area denial, or A2/AD for short. The idea is really simple. You use all these different layers of cheap but effective defenses to make one specific area, like a narrow strait, just too dangerous and too costly for even a much stronger enemy to bother entering. But here's the big twist in the whole story. While all those mines and drones were a real physical threat, Iran's most powerful weapon wasn't military at all. Their real target wasn't some multi-billion-dollar aircraft carrier, it was a corporate balance sheet in London. This is the absolute key to understanding everything that happened next. Iran realized very quickly that it didn't have to actually win a shooting war with the U.S. Navy. In fact, it knew it couldn't. All Iran had to do was make the waterway seem so incredibly risky that the global maritime insurance market would shut it down for them. Their real target was Lloyd's of London. And here's exactly how that played out. On March 1st, Iran just declared the strait was closed. That's it, a press release. 4 days later, the big insurance groups canceled all war risk coverage for any ship going through there. And without insurance, well, commercial shipping just stops. It collapsed to basically zero. And get this strait was commercially dead and buried before anyone even confirmed a single mine was in the water. The threat alone was enough. So this whole approach created a completely new and frankly devastating kind of math for the defenders. It's an economic problem that makes this type of fight almost impossible to win by just throwing more money and firepower at it. I mean, just look at this chart. It's ridiculous. Iran is sending out drones that cost maybe 35 grand a pop. To shoot one of them down, the U.S. has to fire an interceptor missile that costs over $8 million. That is not a winning strategy. It's just not sustainable. Yeah, the cost-exchange ratio is just obscene. The attacker's weapon can be up to 500 times cheaper than the thing you need to stop it. An adversary can throw hundreds of these at you for the price of you stopping just one. You just can't win a long-term war against that kind of math. And this wasn't just theory, it had immediate real-world consequences. In just 4 days, 96 hours, the U.S. military burnt through almost a third of its entire stockpile of these super advanced interceptors. These are weapons that take years and years to build and replace. The attacker is churning out cheap drones while the defender is burning through their crown jewels. Okay, so this isn't just some interesting historical what-if about the Middle East. The big reason this matters so much is because you can bet that military planners in Beijing were watching what happened in Hormuz very, very closely. Because this whole thing looks like a potential playbook for the Taiwan Strait. And when you put the two scenarios side by side, well, the threat becomes pretty clear. Iran, with a pretty modest budget and medium-level tech, managed to shut down a 21-mile strait. Now, just try to imagine China, with a defense budget more than 10 times larger, and some of the most sophisticated A-280 weapons in the world, trying the exact same strategy on the much wider Taiwan Strait. Really, the takeaway from this whole event is pretty stark, and you can't really avoid it. A middle-tier power using cheap tech and a really smart economic strategy proved a huge point. The era when a superpower could just sail its warships wherever it wanted through these contested choke points, well, that era is probably over. And that leaves us with this huge question for the future. Does this combination of cheap drones, simple mines, and weaponizing commercial risk mean that the fundamental balance of naval power has actually shifted for good? What do you think?